The Blast from Our Past Network.
Welcome to our exclusive interview series for Podcasting After Dark with your hosts, Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Tonight's interview is with the makeup effects artist who's worked on Demon Wind, Robot Jocks, and Death Warrant, Jeff Farley.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Podcasting After Dark presents Interviews After Dark. And this month we are joined by makeup and special effects artist Jeff Farley. Jeff, how's it going, buddy?
Good. How you doing tonight?
We're doing great. And
Fantastic.
Jeff has a very extensive body of work. Just shout out to just some of the things that you've worked on: Arena, Shocker, Robot Jocks, Lionheart, Death Warrant, Tombstone, Demolition Man, Alien 3. But three movies that we've actually covered on the show. Jeff worked on Prison from 1987, the Blob remake from 1988, and Demon Wind from 1990. And that was kind of how we sort of linked up, was with Demon Wind.
There you go. Yeah, Demon Wind. It's a classic.
Yes.
You like if you like your cheese, in many different forms, that's the film.
Well, as our listeners know, we absolutely loved that movie. It was a first-time watch for both of us, and we fell head over heels for it. I feel like it was exactly what we needed at that exact moment. It's a lighthearted horror film, not lighthearted, but it's definitely tongue-in-cheek and a lot of fun. Also has some interesting cameos in it. But before we get to that, Jeff, tell us a little bit how you got started in the industry.
Oh, I mean, I started like anybody else, pretty much. I mean, I watched as many films as I could. I mean, I got the horror bug pretty early, and when I saw a film called Equinox in 1971, it kind of grabbed a hold of me mainly because I saw Dave Allen and Dennis Muren on TV that morning promoting the film, and so I got this Taurus model, and I got hooked on it, and that film became an obsession, and then sort of led me to eventually meeting guys like Forey Ackerman first, and then Jim Danforth and Dave Allen himself, and Dennis Muren, and oh boy, Mark McGee, and all the guys who worked on the Equinox. Sort of I kind of got to be friends with them, and turns out they all sort of lived in my area. So it turns out there's so many other weird little connections too, like where I lived in Glendale. I lived in La Crescenta at first, but we moved to Glendale, all kinds of weird little things, and I only found out just within the past couple of years that at Hunt's movie Bloody Birthday was shot about a block below where I lived, and I remember I then remember them coming by my house to talk to my dad about maybe using our house in the film as a location. And
Oh, really?
yeah, so it was kind of weird. It was weird. All my neighbors worked in the industry. One of my neighbors, I had a couple of editors. One guy named Frank Ariosto who lived a few blocks away. He edited RoboCop and Total Recall, Die Hard. Told me it was one day we were over at their house, and he told me that King Kong versus Godzilla.
I think that was your phone, by the way, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, sorry. I think the phone was near the mic because we could hear the vibrating when it was when I think it was getting a text.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to figure out. I think somebody's trying to get a hold of me right now, which is of course because nobody ever gets a hold of me. ever.
No.
Except for when you're doing an interview.
Some text messages or something. I'm like, you have to do it right now. So
Right.
sorry.
It's okay. It's all good. It's all good. You were saying though, you're in Glendale. You're amongst so many people that in the industry that you are in your
Yeah,
neighborhood.
another one of my neighbors edited Star Wars, and I used to carry his Oscar around and
What?
all this kind of weird stuff. Kind of, it turns out I lived in the middle of all of that stuff and just kind of gravitated towards it. But it wasn't until I met a guy at Forey Ackerman's one night who got me a couple of friends on the Kingdom of the Spiders, and that was just, I mean, we were just a couple of weeks of just dremeling spiders that would be used in the background, and it was just Dremel the scenes, throw them in the box, Dremel the scene. I think we had like maybe 300 or 400 of them to do. So that was like a real inauspicious start. And from there, kind of lived my life and then kind of would look for other little things to do. So that became kind of the focus of my life and a few of my friends. We all sort of wanted to work in the industry. So I think it was just by sheer, basically being in the area kind of helped us a lot. So
That's wild.
what else? Yeah, we sort of, it was sort of like a moth to a flame sort of thing.
That's so do you still talk to people like that you grew up with that started out the same time you did? Are they still in the industry too?
Well, I mean, on social media, we're still sort of in touch. We don't really talk a lot these days because everyone's sort of living their own lives now. But it's nice to see that they're still around, and so we're sort of, yeah, we sort of keep an eye on each other that way these days. So everybody does. It's just not the way it used to be when we were kids.
Yeah.
The way each other was to call. So
You're saying that you worked on Kingdom of the Spiders using a Dremel tool and making some. That must have been a trip to be working on something like that. I believe William Shatner's in that one. Isn't he in that one?
Yeah, William Shatner and Woody Strode, who we just saw in Vigilante. Yeah.
Right.
I remember I worked for a guy named Douglas Barrett Jones, and he was the subject of an issue of Famous Monsters where they would like kind of dedicate the issue to a certain person. And the Food of the Gods cover with the rat and the girl in the tree. And
Yeah.
this guy, Douglas Barrett Jones, who had been working at the Berman Studios and Don Post making masks and stuff. They dedicated this issue to him, and so that's sort of like how I got to know the guy, and I remember V. Neal coming over one night. She's quite big these days, like she does everything. I think I can't remember, won at least one Oscar, maybe more. So it was kind of neat getting to see that sort of stuff early on. And but like I said, it was a pretty boring job. I mean, just like making the spiders, and it didn't come around to years later when I was working with William Shatner, and I told him about working on Kingdom of the Spiders, and that seemed to please him. He seemed to hear that.
That's awesome. And from there, you kind of went on to Twilight Zone. But for our sort of audience, because we are very 80s nostalgic and everything, you did work on the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
That Twilight Zone episode came before that. And even in between then, between working on Kane the Spiders and working on that stuff, I worked on a bunch of short films, and I was doing makeup for I was doing makeup for a band called TSOL.
No, yeah, I remember that band.
So every once in a while I do makeup for them, and but we're like a short film, would kind of like a student film basically. They were more um, do little things like that. But in '84, I worked on through another friend that I met, a guy named Jane Turnbow, who worked on Galaxy of Terror.
Nice.
He got on a film. It was made for Showtime. Um, it was called The Ratings Game, and it starred Danny DeVito and was it Rhea Perlman,
Yeah,
and a
and
bunch of
Derek Graham was in that.
yeah, a bunch of other actors, and but my friend Gene got the job making a parrot puppet and a prop, like a prop award, and which he basically handed over to me to do most of the stuff. I built the um, animatronics for the parrot, and I didn't finish it up, but that was pretty much, I did all the internal mechanisms and stuff and figured out how to make a little controller the actor could wear and puppeteer it at the same time, and doing it basically reading the Tom Savini book. Like
Yeah.
that's basically
Yeah.
figure that stuff out. And the award that Danny DeVito ends up winning at the end, but it was a real cool thing to work on, and then I worked on that Twilight Zone episode, and I worked over at Makeup Effects Lab also on the Stepford Children.
Oh
With
wow.
Barbara Eden one night.
Yeah.
We down near the LA Zoo, and we were working with Barbara Eden, and it was cool. I mean, got to see a house blow up in the middle of a parking lot.
With the ratings game, handling that award, did you channel handling the Oscar that you when you were a kid?
Oh yeah, it was like the award was a lot was wasn't as well built. From what I understand, they dropped it and it kind of fell apart and had to be re-glued back together. But pretty much it was like given a bunch of stuff and some super glue and said, here's how you do it. It's like just so so but they got the shots they needed. I'm really happy I got to work on that. That was one of those kind of odd jobs. I mean, I never thought. I mean, I'd be able to work on a film where Steve Allen and Jane Meadows are characters prop I built, and I mean, Steve Allen of all people.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
you
huge.
know, like I did everything at one point. So
Yeah. Yeah, this is crazy to me, your story, because you clearly are a fan of movies and of
oh yeah,
like mind of Corey and I, with the horror being an emphasis on things you love. And here you're getting to do work on these movies that you're a fan of, or the genre you're a fan of.
yeah. What's cool is really is it's the people you work with, because you never know. I mean, you might work with somebody that you kind of grew up watching. In Romania, on the Primeals, I remember Dave Allen one day
Yeah,
just matter of fact, he goes, "Oh yeah, Robert Cornthwaite's coming in tomorrow morning." It's like, wait a second, Robert Cornthwaite from another world. He's still alive.
right.
That's that was my reaction, and but sure enough, the next morning, actually, I think he showed up maybe later that day or something. But the next morning, I went down to the dining room, and he was sitting there, and I ended up having breakfast with him and hanging out with them. I mean, it was just such a trip. I mean, like I said, it's the people you work with.
I mean, like, and working on Primevals with David Allen, that came out, I believe, was it last year or the year before?
Last year, yeah, 30 years after we shot it was finally finished. And
Tell
now,
everybody the story, the backstory behind that, because that's kind of a cool, the whole how it where it started to where it ended up is a pretty fascinating story.
well, Dave Allen, sort of him and Jim Danforth and Dennis Mirren all sort of conceived it, and I think it was after Dave and Dennis or after they had all done Equinox, and maybe a year or so after they had finished the original version of it, around maybe 1968 or so, they started coming up with this idea of a project that they could do, that they could utilize their talents again, and sort of they were very entrepreneurial. They thought they would just go ahead and do their own thing again. I think Jim was probably a little more practical in that respect, but David and Dennis had a lot of still that youthful energy that sort of drives you, at the beginning of your career. And so they conceived this idea of it was originally like a Zeppelin getting blown off course and ends up in somewhere where I think it was Vikings originally or something.
Yeah.
And there were these, they started with some prehistoric elements, I believe, and it wasn't until a little bit later that they added the antagonist, the lizard men, and Jim Danforth originally was going to do all of that stuff, and they called them the Sithars, and then Jim got called off to do When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, and that sort of left everything in the lurch. And while that happened, Hammer Films sort of caught wind of it, and they started working with Dave on developing the idea, which sort of then devolved into a mess of where they want to get rid of all the lizard men and just have their antagonists would just be another tribe with strange headgear or something. But throughout the years, Dave would kind of get, maybe a little somewhere with the project, and then it would sort of fold again. But he kept persevering at it. It wasn't until the late 70s when he met Charlie Band, and they did Laser Blast.
Yeah.
Charlie wanted to use the Lizard Man models for those aliens, and Dave said, no, I want to use these for my project. And so that's why we ended up with those turtle-like aliens in Laser Blast. And Dave talked Charlie into taking on the Primevals, and Charlie was really in a lot of ways the perfect person for it, because him growing up in Italy with his dad, Albert Band, being a producer and director with a lot of really cool genre films.
Yeah.
He had this love of horror and science fiction and comic books and film and stuff like that himself. I mean, Charlie has sort of a certain persona, but at the same time, he's a real fan also,
Yeah.
and loves. So the Primevals sort of fit perfectly with him, because he loved films like Jason and the Argonauts and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and so they got close to it in '78, and that's when I first met Dave. Was at his studio while they were in pre-production. I think they're just going also into The Daytime Ended, because I remember seeing one of the map paintings of the spaceship or the UFO graveyard. But they were still working on the Primevals, and I saw things like the arena set that had been built, as well as the mind control gun that they eventually still used in the film. But that went away again. They couldn't get the financing for it, and it kept, over the years, Charlie would get close, and he would promote it and try to get money for it. And in '94, they finally were able to mount the production in Romania and Italy also, and that's when it got shot. And I somehow got involved serendipitously. I mean, I wanted to work on the show ever since meeting Dave.
Yeah.
But I got involved because I was renting a house with a friend of mine. He worked in the industry also, a guy named Dave Matherly, and we worked on films like Poltergeist 2 and Ghostbusters and all kinds of stuff. And but he had been working for Steve Neal. I knew the Primeavals was in production because I knew that Steve Neal was working on the hominid suits because Dave was on that crew and was telling me about it.
Hmm.
When it came to shoot, go into production, go over to Romania, the plan was Dave would go over there with the suits and sort of run the stuff for Steve Neal and Mark Rappaport's units. But that was about the time that Todd Masters had Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight going also. Dave decided to go over to that show, which turns out that they were the airport hangar where they were shooting. It was maybe about like a mile or a mile and a half from where we lived. So it was like a real easy, jaunt to and from set, where you could actually get home at night a decent hour and sleep.
Yeah, commuting is key.
Yeah, so Dave ended up referring me to Full Moon, and I ended up going down there and talking to them and told them my story about meeting Dave, and they said you're hired. So that was pretty
Awesome.
much, and at that point too, I got hired to do a couple of Godzilla jobs for one for Trendmasters uh, doing some figures for their bendy toys, and then got hired onto by Sony ImageWorks for the '94 Godzilla that never got made, sculpting a maquette that Sony ImageWorks turned into a digital Godzilla, which apparently stomped around the MGM parking lot for their bid. So
Wow. That's
so
awesome.
that was done. I flew off to Romania. I was there for 9 weeks and ended up not only running the makeup effects department, but playing like every dead hominid, as well as I'm the first hominid who gets killed by the Yeti.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay. That's amazing.
but yeah, I skipped over Dave passing away in '99 and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
that's, I mean, the fact that Chris Endicott and Charlie, got the film back together and got it released. I mean, I'm sure Dave is somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's really special. The fact that it got released and we are huge Full Moon fans. We've been Full Moon Empire, dating back to the glory days of cinema when it comes to Charles Band and Richard Band has been on the show. We've talked to Richard about quite a bit extensively about his career. So,
Yeah. And speaking of Empire, pictures, you worked on Prison. That was a movie that we reviewed pretty early on in our like I think in our first year, which is
yeah.
about 7 years ago. But a movie that's a lot of fun. Can you talk about your experience on Prison?
Sure. I mean, I had just like finished up about a 3 month stint over at Lance Anderson's on The Serpent and the Rainbow,
Wow.
and I needed a job, and I went over to Beekler's, and luckily they were hiring, and they had the Garbage Pail Kids movie going, which was one thing that sort of I had my hand in a bit. But Prison was going also, and I did a lot more work on that in way of I was making molds and things. They had I remember making molds of the Larry Flash Jenkins head that burns up. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
Building that, and I did another one. The Lane Smith got well, his death at the end of the film. Originally, they were going to shoot a dummy head. Also, we prepared it, and John wanted a head that it was weird. It was a weird request. I ended up like sculpting the core. It was like a skull sculpted in reverse, so that when I cast it, it would be this sort of like skull that then would burn down to the skull. And we built the head, I think, but they never got around to shooting it. And so
Bummer. Because yeah, his death is he's wrapped in. Well, no, that's another guy that gets wrapped in barbed wire
they
at
said
the end.
the barbed wire, but at the end in the car, his death was going to be a little more spectacular.
Right. Okay.
And but I guess they figured that I think they probably figure one more. What's one more burning head? I mean, it's like if we lose one of those, who's going to notice? Already had a couple of those, and but it was a really cool experience because I remember one of the things that I got to do was I was working with a guy named Jeff Kennemore, and Jeff had worked with Rob Bottin on The Thing, and I worked with Mike McCracken, I mean, really, really great sculptor and a wonderful guy, but he and I both sculpted the prosthetics that Kane Hodder wore.
I was going to ask.
Out of the ground, and Jeff sculpted a few of the pieces like the cheeks and stuff, and I ended up doing the forehead and the chin and the back of the headpiece, and it was based on a Buechler design. John took a head cast of Kane and did a really rough sculpture of how he wanted it to look, and that's what Jeff and I basically did. And so we had a hand in making those pieces also. And, I was kind of a thrill because I was the first time got to do anything with Kane, and I didn't meet him at that point. It wasn't until many years later that I finally got to meet him. And, so yeah, it was a pretty neat experience. I mean, like I said, the Garbage Pail Kids movie going on, and it was it was a yuck fest. It was like, I mean, we couldn't believe we were working on that.
Well, I mean, that movie's kind of become, it's a cult favorite amongst people. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Frankie Frico,
I have not, but it's on Tubi now. I think I want to check it out.
Yeah, you should. I think you really appreciate it. It's a nice homage to the good old days of shock cinema in that way.
That's I mean with Stephen Kostansky, it is like, yeah, definitely definitely like his work. It's like, I was thinking also back to those days we were working on Prison and Garbage Pail Kids movie, but that also led to me getting my first solo job with John, or my first key job on a film called Deadly Weapon, which started out as Laser Blast 2. And was a guy named Michael Miner directed it. He co-wrote RoboCop, and Rodney Eastman from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies starred in it.
Yeah.
It was an interesting film to work on. I got to do some interesting gags for that. And,
was it daunting for you though to have a gig like that to go from
Yeah, I was sort of like, 3 weeks in, and then suddenly John puts me in charge of a show, and I'm like, I got to figure it out as I go along. I mean, that's really sort of what it all ended up being. I mean, I think John once stated, if he wrote a book, it would be called Making It Up as I go along. It really kind of fit the whole. And John would be there some nights on the show. We would drive to one of the locations together and hang out. So I get to see how he would do stuff, and then I would just sort of follow suit. So it worked out. Yeah, I was very pleased getting to do that, especially when I found out it was Laser Blast 2. I mean, I wish the aliens would have been there, but still.
Yeah, did they any reason why they changed it to Deadly Weapon instead of Laser Blast 2?
From what I understand, when Michael Miner came aboard, he wanted to change the tone of it and turn it less like science fiction and more science fact. And the gun is a military weapon that's so instead of alien origin anymore, it's an earthbound weapon.
I see.
Yeah, so it had more of a military presence in the film. There's some good character actors in it too. I mean, so so that was cool. It was fun working on those films again, because the people you work with on them, you're kind of like, oh, we got to remember, this person from that show or that. and so I mean, kind of makes it interesting to while you're sitting there uh, munching off a craft service table.
Well, what we found is when we interview a lot of people, oftentimes it's the maybe smaller projects or the lesser known movies that they're more fond of because there is more of a camaraderie with these, less studio involvement. And it seems like based on what you're saying, you've worked on so many different films ranging from huge budget to minor, or maybe no budget, depending on what it is. Demon Wind, perhaps.
Cellar Dweller, maybe.
I'm glad I got to work on that one.
Well, I mean, it's like you got these like bona fide cult classics that just people and it's and maybe you can tell us, like, have you seen a resurgence in these movies now that, like, they're getting these boutique Blu-rays and everything, and Empire, they put out that Empire Pictures box set. Cellar Dweller was in there, Robot Jocks was in there. I mean, Jeff, we could talk to you for like 5 hours about all these movies that we
Yeah.
grew up like loving. But like, are you seeing that now? Are you seeing these movies that maybe you thought back in the day were okay, whatever, I'm moving on, but now they're just getting these huge cult followings?
Oh, it's cool. I mean, I mean, I think about like the films that I used to watch, on TV when I was a kid, and it's sort of a lineage there. The other people are watching the stuff that myself and other people, worked on, and it's an odd industry that way. A friend of mine once sort of told me, he put it this way: he says, with all of your credits, you'll never have to chicken scratch for your immortality. And he's sort of right there. I think about doing Lou Diamond Phillips's makeup on Demon Wind. That was my first makeup, and I had been on that show because I've been working for Lance Anderson, and when he got the show, I was part of the crew that started on it, and we worked for maybe a couple of months, maybe it was 6 weeks, maybe it was 2 months or so, and the show, an investor pulled out and left the show in the lurch, and we sort of disbanded. Lance put everything in bags. He sort of bagged all the sculptures, and weekly he would go in and spray them down because these guys seemed pretty motivated to get the money to continue on. And it took about 3 months, but they got the money together and new investors to come in and pick up the slack. And so we went back into production, but that meant that Lance had to bring in pretty much an entirely new crew, and I was the only person who was there at the beginning.
Wow.
Throughout the entire production, from the beginning of it all the way through the end of the shoot. And we had a great time, though. It was a lot of fun working and stuff. It was a young crew. We were all guys like Dave Atherton, Scott Coulter, Dan Fry, and Brian Panicus and his brother Dave at the beginning, along with John Blake. And so, I mean, it was an interesting crew and a lot of really good people. And we just kind of had a really good time. And then when we went to set, we shot all of those interiors were shot in a tiny little storefront, maybe just 3 miles away from here, from where I'm living. Just a tiny, tiny little storefront place. And then all the exterior shots were done up at the 20th Century Fox lot lot that they have up in the Gura Hills.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so we shot those up there, and it was a wild set because all these celebrities would come through. We everyone from Melissa Etheridge to Blair Underwood to who else? I mean, it's like we had Lou Diamond Phillips was on set all the time because his wife was or second AD on the show.
So were they rolling in because they were friends with Lou?
Yeah, pretty much. They're yeah,
Okay.
just friend, and they just come and check out the set. It was kind of this weird.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, we it was a really loose place. Chuck Moore, the director, had was very fond of saying it was close enough for show business.
Yeah. I
Sort of
mean,
his, excuse me. Yeah,
that's
that
a
was sort of
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. You can tell in the film. Yeah, it's
Oh
like,
yeah, like when we were introduced to Demon Wind, we're like, okay, because Corey and I, we grew up, we both worked at video stores. We our favorite films growing up as kids were horror, sci-fi, et cetera, et cetera. Huge fans of the genre. Demon Wind was always one of those movies that we would see on the shelf but wouldn't grab. And so Vinegar Syndrome put out a beautiful transfer with a ton of extras. Again, we
yeah,
highly recommend everyone go buy that.
yeah. I supplied some the behind the scenes images for that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's so rad. And here we are watching this movie, and we're like, this is way better than I think it was intended to be.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you mentioned, the fun that you guys were having behind the scenes. I absolutely think that comes through in the movie.
yeah.
I mean, obviously the story is
yeah,
it's supposed to be serious, but there's a level of fun that this movie has, and I think it's coming through.
they really seem to take it really that seriously. So they just kind of like we just, but they took it seriously enough to, they didn't like treat it. It wasn't like it was weird. It was like kind of this weird campy, non-campy type of acting in it. It's funny too because I think of a guy, one of the actors I saw, he was a day player on it, a guy named Richard Gabai, uh, who I had done. I did a movie called Blood Nasty, um, which is sort of really, really super rare horror film that was Linnea Quigley's first producing gig, and she starred in it, and Troy Donahue, but it was this really low budget horror thing that a guy named Robert Strauss did, and Robert eventually went on and produced, was one of the producers on Fire in the Sky.
Oh wow.
Uh,
Okay, cool.
but he it was weird. It's like the first day of shooting, he really kind of like froze, and he couldn't get any. They couldn't get anything out of him. I mean,
Oh no.
so Richard Gabai was one of the lead actors in the film, and he ended up taking over the directing gig, and he did a great job with it. But it was funny because at that point on Demon Wind, it was like it seemed like every film I was doing, Richard was in. Like all
Oh
these
really?
Fred films, suddenly Richard would be there, and it was like, what is going on? But he's great. I mean, we're like really good friends, but it was just one of those, But on Demon Wind, when he showed up for
That
his day, it was
you're
like,
like,
here
what's
it's
what's going on here? Well, and that's a trip that well, my wife would say there's something meant to be with you guys to keep working together on projects, but the effects and the makeup effects specifically for Demon Wind are phenomenal. Like, a lot of low budget movies come and go, and you go, yeah, okay, clearly they skimped on that or this, not on the effects. Did you have like pretty much free reign when it came to all that stuff?
Well, Lance had pretty much come up with the idea behind the stuff, and he was a very good designer, so I think he sketched up some stuff. But it was more like a disease type of thing. It was rather than being a real traditional demony type of look, or even sort of an exorcist type of possession. They're really maybe a little over the top,
Hmm.
theatrical in some ways with the boils and pustules and fangs and kind of this asymmetrical look. And we did a lot of work. I mean, most of those pieces, with the exception of just a few, the pieces on the lead, uh, Dan Coco, who played the Master Demon, and maybe one or two other actors were there for life casts, and the rest of the pieces were all just generic that we just slapped on. whoever, because we just had so many different varied actors that we just had all these overlapping pieces that we would slap on. I did the makeup on Stephen Quadros, um, which I think Dave Atherton supplied a piece that he had made for something else for when Stephen is killed, and then his demon makeup, we went ahead and slapped that piece over the top of that also, which gave it a little extra gruesomeness. And you know, it was like I said, these were really fun over the top makeups, and a lot of pus. We kind of surmised that their blood would sort of become more like pus because of the demon infection or something. It's all Hollywood, you know, Hollywood hogwash. But it was, it was a lot of fun. I remember we did, gloves for actors that we twisted fingers on them, and some interesting gags that we did for it. That long tongue, like big giant tongue that pops out of the skull. It was an interesting thing to handle. And I think of one night. Actually, it was our wrap on the shoot, and we were racing to get finished before the sun came up. And we're pushing daylight, getting these last shots, and they I had to go to we were taking actors out of makeup at that point. I remember being down in the makeup trailer and finishing up and walking up to set, and I saw like a person just running past me at the top speed, and then before I know it, I see another person and another person, and go up to the set, and I find out that the generator had run out of gas.
Oh no!
And people running to their cars to siphon fuel
Oh God!
to put into the generator to get enough light to get these last night shots they needed for the film before the sun came up.
That's
so
dedication.
yeah, it was kind of crazy that way. Yeah.
Explains why the cars didn't start in the movie then, because it wasn't because the demon forces, it was just they ran out of gas.
It was another interesting thing about it was Tom Calloway, the director of photography. I mean, I worked with him on his first director, his first like real director of photography job, I believe, was on Slumber Party Massacre 2. I think he did something maybe before that, but that was another film that I'd worked on, and from that point, I mean, Tom and I had worked together in a ton of shows, especially his sort of his the film he doesn't like to talk about is his directorial debut of Murder Cycle.
Okay.
But I've mentioned it. But yeah, Tom and I did a ton of stuff, and yeah, it's funny when you watch that Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray. I mean, even I found out things I didn't know. I didn't know that all the camera equipment had been rented to the production by Ron Jeremy, which yeah, that was an interesting revelation.
And we weren't disinfecting things now like we do now back then probably.
That's
Well, I mean, I would tell the story about him coming in for live cast over an Optic Nerve.
Who, Ron Jeremy?
Yeah,
oh wow.
yeah, it was an interesting.
Well, you gotta tell the story now, because
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was there was a film being shot that John had taken on, and Ron had a disguise makeup in it. It was an adult film, actually.
Okay.
shocker.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say the name. I don't even remember the name actually.
That's fair. That's fair.
but he came in for his face cast, just a normal face cast like anybody would get for some prosthetics. And I remember one of the things was he brushed his hair. He took a brush off of the table and brushes his hair back, and after he's done with it, he puts it down, and everybody is wearing gloves at that point. Somebody picks it up and drops the brush in a big jar of barbicide that they've got on the makeup station.
Good call.
And after we finished the life cast and he left, and he name dropped like everybody, who he was going to go. I think it's a Robert Altman. I'm going to go see Robert Altman now. Or this, okay, great. But he, that brush sat in that jar of barbicide forever, and nobody ever took it out after that. Nobody even dared to open it. So, yeah, I figured it's like that isn't the barbicide forever.
That is hilarious.
That is amazing.
Plus side, we had John Ritter come over for an episode, the live cast for an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and he was great. It was really cool. So,
God bless him. Jeff, I do want to, because we did cover the Blob remake, so I want to roll back a couple years. And what are your experiences on that?
Oh gosh, I mean, that was one of those sort of like another sort of wish that I could work on something like that shows, because I had about 10 years prior, I had been corresponding with Jack Harris, thanks to my interest in Equinox again. I got a hold of Jack Harris and started talking to him, but one day when I was chatting with him, I told him that one of my goals was to work on a film that he produced. And lo and behold, 10 years later, I'm on the Creature Effects crew for the Blob remake. I saw Jack on set once, but I never got to talk to him. But I was there. And I wasn't there for the longest time. I was there maybe on the show for maybe a month and a half or so. I did a lot of stuff on it that I saw still made into the show, but it was interesting because they'd already been shooting for about 4 months in pre-production and shooting. When we were over in Italy shooting Arena, they were in pre-production on the Blob at that point, and they were already shooting Louisiana, I think, in January when we were still over in Italy. And we came back in February, and it was about 2 weeks after I got back from Arena that I called the Blob shop and got hired immediately and went down and just started working. And I mean, just doing all kinds of stuff, working in the animatronics department at first, and then moving over to molding and casting and doing some sculpting and doing a lot of set work also. And it got to a while where I'd drive to the Hollywood shop, the Blob shop, and work for a few hours, and then I'd have to drive to Valencia to the first unit set and work there for a while. And then my day would end by driving to Simi Valley to the Dream Quest miniature unit and shooting like we'd wrap ourselves in plastic bags and duct tape and try to prevent slime from getting on us from being underneath the tables, puppeteer silk, bags filled with Methacel. And it was cool. I mean, it was interesting. I think everybody kind of it's a big pain in the butt in a lot of ways, but in the end, I mean, it was a cool experience because, again, never thought I'd get to work with Lyle Conway or Chuck Russell, or people like that. Chuck was he was very hot-headed. I mean, just having a lot of pressure on him, and he was prone to yelling at the time, and I got the brunt of it.
Oh no.
And I figured it's like I'm part of the crew. I felt like I'd seen him do it to Shawnee Smith and Mark Irwin and stuff, and then I got it, and I said, "Wow, I'm part of the movie, part of the
Yeah.
crew."
Oh, cause that like yeah, if that's
It's
your
a rite of
initiation.
passage.
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a rite of passage, but and honestly, I'm really proud to have worked on it. I'm really happy that a guy named Brian Wade worked in the he worked on Tony Gardner's side, a sculptor, and he had worked on The Thing, and he would say things like the working on the Blob was about as close to working on The Thing as he could remember, which was cool for a lot of us there because that would have been the show that we would have all died to be a part of. But
Well, I think it's also fair to say that The Blob is one of the best horror remakes,
yeah, yeah.
better than the original. Like The Thing is better than, Thing from Another
Oh
Planet.
yeah, they just took cool chances, and they weren't afraid to shake things up in a way. It's I mean honestly, the studios have just become too. Um, I say that it's sort of follow the follower type of mentality now because nobody's really leading anymore,
Yeah.
uh, and they can't really take. It's funny because there's a lot of really interesting and very expensive looking effects in a lot of these films now, and yet I just don't feel any impact from
Right.
them. You see things now these days that are extremely realistic that it's when you see it all in one shot. And there's something, I don't know, for me, something about doing it in cuts, doing those impact shots and things, inserts and things, but that they somehow add a flow to it. When you just see the thing all happen at once, it just sort of, all right, on to the next thing. And you don't really feel much, like I said, impact. So,
I mean, that's something we talk about on the show a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I think, I know a lot of our listeners feel the same way, but, give me a Demon Wind over any of these
yeah,
new CGI
Not
horror
gonna
movies any
agreed.
day.
well, they if they well somebody actually, oh gosh, what was Eric Mathis, I believe, was planning on doing Demon Wind 2, which would have it got sort of canceled at the last minute. He ended up doing another show, but see, that's something that could be fun because at least he would have adhered to a certain strict sense of rules set forth by the film, practical and stuff. But I mean, God, if somebody tried to do it these days and inject a lot of money into it, and turn it into sort of a post production effects fest, it would be a total mess.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's just there's a certain formula to these things, and it's funny because here I am saying this stuff, and I haven't watched a lot of horror films these
Same.
days.
We haven't, Corey probably has seen more than I have, but I tend to delve, I'm watching movies for Pad, obviously, for podcasting after dark, and $2 late fee, the other show I do. But oftentimes I'm finding myself digging deep into that nostalgia, And
Yeah,
when I look at your filmography, when we go down the list of the movies you've worked on, and there so many of them, we go, oh yeah, I love that one. Oh yeah, I love that one. Robot Jocks, check. Shocker, check. Like these are great. And you talk about there are probably fine horror films now, but there is I was saying the other day, you look at a Ridley Scott movie now, it does not compare to Blade Runner. It's just the way it's shot, the way it looks. Carpenter's films, as much as I love John Carpenter, his movies later on did not have the same look that They Live or
Well,
Uh,
how about, for example, I mean, I love Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is a beautiful, amazing, fun movie, but I will watch Robot Jocks over
Yeah,
Pacific Rim any
Same.
day of the week. And it's just there's something about that tactile physicalness that those miniatures existed, in the world and everything. It just makes it more real.
for me, I prefer. I mean, I I don't know. There's something about the way actors seemed more convicted in their roles in the past, and I watch a lot of spaghetti westerns, and I just kind of like the banter and the way the characters play and interesting dialogue and delivered in an interesting way, and but these days a lot of films, they sort of treat their actors or like they're sort of second rate Clint Eastwood impersonators, and that's
Right.
just the it's talking these hushed tones, real monotone, and I'm finding little impact that doesn't. I mean, it doesn't compel me to watch it, and that's the saddest thing because I grew up loving everything. I could watch any kind of film. I could, and I think I mean, what's sort of getting me, and I think there was something that was actually I was interested in seeing it. I can't remember what it is now. That says there you go. There's the state of the matter as it
That
is.
is the state. And to be honest with you, because you're talking about like people having a certain look or wanting to emulate a certain thing, I would be remiss not to ask. You worked on two projects with Jean-Claude Van Damme, Lionheart and Death Warrant. Any stories that came out of that working on those films?
Well, I mean, the Death Warrant thing was first, and that was one of those films. I always thought that I'd gotten away from working on a Canon film, and I found out that that was one of Canon's last films they shot before they folded, and or they were in production and ended up getting sold over to Pathé. It was called Dusted at the beginning, and Lance Anderson brought me in on it, and it was mainly to work on the stuff with Patrick Kilpatrick, um, and he'd burn makeup on him, and then there was some scar makeups, and I'd have to go down to set. Lance and I would go down for some of the main stuff, and then he would send me down to set for more incidental sorts of things. It was a nice, it was a nice shoot, and I don't remember a lot about that. I do remember though finding out later that Darren Sarafian co-starred in Zombie 3, and I kind of went, oh
Yeah.
crap! If I'd known, it would have kicked me off set. I would be bugging him so much. And I got to be good friends with that show's makeup artist, Nina Kraft, and
Okay.
got the job on Lionheart. And part of her department duties was she was able to hire a makeup effects person and somebody to do prosthetics, and so she decided to hire me on the show.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah, so I sort of slid from one Jean Claude Van Damme show to another, right back to back, and I did some pieces for Harrison Page, a gold tooth, and he wore a little brow piece over one of his eyes. I think his right eye, and kind of looked like he was some damage from boxing.
Right. He's so great in it too. I mean, we love him in Sledgehammer, but
Yeah.
he's just
Nina had left the show and prior to the shooting started, but I got kept on, and another guy came in to take over, and I ended up doing stuff like. Turns out the makeup department knew nothing about putting on prosthetics, and I got a
oh,
panic call. They can come to set and do this, fix up this makeup. And so I go down, shoot down to set, and do that for a nice little paycheck, and then I get a request. The producer would say, "Hey, we're doing a burn makeup in a couple of days. You think you can do that?" And so I'd end up getting these extra little jobs on it, which was great because they weren't really budgeted. Well, they weren't like in my original deal, so I was able to to budget, for them per job. So I get paid X amount to do this and X amount to do that. And so it worked out pretty well. And then they went to Las Vegas, and that pretty much my stuff was over at that point. And that was is what I thought until like a day or two in, they called me up and said, "Hey, Jean Claude thought of something, and do you have like a hand he could stab?" And I went, "Wait." The funny thing is that Scott Coulter and I were like renting a house together, and I remember he had decided we had a mold left over from another show, an arm mold, and he ran a polyfoam arm out of it, and he buried it in the ground in the backyard. He just dug a hole and stuck it in there and covered it up. And I went, wait a second. So I'll call you guys back. And I went outside and dug this arm up out of the ground. And it was still in good shape. And I ended up cleaning that up. And I said, yeah, I got something we can use. And originally they were going to just have me pack it up and fly it out there. They were just going to have me send it out there. And within a couple of hours, they're like, all right, we're getting you a ticket. Can you just come out here for a few days? And so I ended up going out to Vegas for a few days for the location shoot on that and doing a couple of little things. But thanks to Jean Claude, I got a pretty hefty payday for just having to dig an arm out of the ground and fly to Vegas. So,
well, that's wonderful that that's great. But then my question to you is two things. One, why did he put an arm in the back in the ground? And two, when you were checking bags and whatnot, did it go through the X-ray machine and they saw a severed arm, or did you check that bag?
well, Scott just decided he was just being silly. He just wanted to give something a try, and he just
okay, sure.
Just what'll happen to it if we just stick it in the ground and maybe some girl find it or something. And
okay, that makes sense.
And I had no idea that maybe a year or so later that I just suddenly need a hand. I need an arm. It was like hand up to the elbow, and
amazing.
And it turned out to be perfect for what I needed. And what was that second question?
No, I said here you are, like checking your bags, and did a seven.
Something that went through pretty easily. That was back in the days when everything was easy. I mean, we didn't have the problems we have these days.
True.
The travel was some pretty hefty stuff for full moon shows. But I won't say much more about that. But we but I do remember on a full moon show though, coming back from doing Witch House and Retro Puppet Master, and I had I brought a severed head back with me, and I had it in a bag, this white plastic bag, and you could kind of see the face through this bag. And going through customs, the two guys decided to ask. They said, "Open that box there," and that was the one that the head was in. And
oh no!
And they kind of flipped out originally, and then they saw what it was, and they finally, I think, said something like, what's the tariff on a severed head? And $10,000, and they started laughing.
That's funny. That's hilarious. Yeah, I'm sure we could devote a whole episode to working with Charles Band and all the antics that go on there. But
yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, Jeff, we could literally talk to you for like 5 hours straight. You have so many amazing stories. Maybe we can have you back on the show one of these days, and we can dive into a lot of these other movies and projects that you worked on. Is there anything that you would like to plug now? Is there anything you'd like for us to put in, links in the show notes or anything like that?
I'll send you some links, and I mean, there's just my Facebook is just my name, just good old Jeff Farley, and Instagram is at Obscure Artifacts. IMDb is Jeffrey S. Farley. And then I've got a website, Jeff Farley Fine Art. farley.com. That's where my paintings, which I'll hopefully sell. I may bring some money in again. I'll start to I'll make a storm that way somehow. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I can send over those also. You can post them. So
Cool.
Okay. Well, I mean, thank you
Sure.
so much for taking
for
the
sure.
time and talking to us.
Yeah, this has really been great. Thank you again, Jeff. And, thank you for all the stories and looking forward to the next round with you.
Oh, for sure. Corey, Zach, it was really a pleasure. And thanks so much. And talk to you guys later.
Have a good
Absolutely.
one, Jeff.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Podcasting After Dark's exclusive interview series with Jeff Farley. And, as always, thank you for your support.